So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
To another episode of Connecting the Dots, where we unravel the stories of individuals who forged their own paths into the unknown. Super scary, by the way. I'm your host, K.Short, and today we embark on a journey with Jessica Velasco. I'm going to have to clarify on that. Velasco, a Filipino-American entrepreneur, educator, and advocate for inclusive leadership. So again, Jess is a second-generation Filipino-American and a certified women's leadership coach, educator, speaker, and facilitator. Her life vision is to foster an inclusive society where BIPOC individuals can flourish personally and professionally. Jess's journey has been marked by navigating challenges such as personal development, near-death experiences, mental health struggles, and honoring her Panay roots. She is the founder of Jess Say It Life Leadership Coaching and Consulting, and is dedicated to helping overachievers and people-pleasers overcome subconscious survival mentalities to reclaim peace, purpose, and play in their lives. So I'm so excited to bring Jess onto the show. Just a little backstory. We met at Gather and Connect LA earlier in April, which was like last month, and as she was helping host with the Conscious Exchange. I was the creative in the room, which is sometimes something that happens, and I was with Two Geeked Marketing, so shout out to Krista on that. And so I was just doing some photo and video. But the way that Jess was working the room, as she led the icebreaker activities and knew everyone in the room, it's typically who I am when I'm hosting gatherings too. So I was like, I had to ask her what she did because it's not something that I've seen to that caliber. So it turns out that she was the community manager, and I was just curious about her background and how she got there. And of course, also with an educator's background turned entrepreneur, I wanted to learn more. So here we are, and I'm so excited to learn more about Jess and share with all of you how she got to where she is from turning educator to entrepreneur, because I know that that's something I'm in the midst to. So let's go ahead and invite Jess onto the show.
Well, we're good now?
Yeah.
Yay! Well, first and foremost, K.Short, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And thank you for your flexibility of the technology. Let's be real. We can't control it sometimes. As much as we want to control things, we can't always control everything. No. And also, I really appreciate those affirmations. So let's go affirmations.
Let's do all of this. Yeah, like I said, when I met you and I saw you, I was like, I know this. I know this avatar, and I get to just sit back. I get to just sit back as a creative. That's like the nice part, is like I'm learning to like step into different roles and realizing that I don't always have to be the one to step in, like having to step up or having to, and realizing that everyone has their roles in certain spaces and places. And so it was super nice to just like step back and like be behind the camera and be like, I know nothing of what's going on. I'm just here to capture all the amazing moments that y'all are having together. But it was super awesome to just like witness someone else also in their element and being like, okay, cool. Like, I know that there's a place for us, for those of us who are choosing not to be a part of the educational system for a little bit or for a long time, and seeing and witnessing like how others are forging their own path, and seeing how we can still educate, support, facilitate, and lead out in these streets. So I was super inspired to like see you and be like, okay, there's a space for us out here. What does that look like, in this new world that we are venturing into as young people, also guiding other young people in this new world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. It's real. Yeah. It's totally real.
Why don't you give them a little bit of background about your role with the Conscious Exchange, or just like all of that really quick, just so they have an idea. Because like I said, I came in with the camera, but I was also like, where am I? What am I doing? And how did you find yourself into that space?
Yeah, so I'm currently the community manager at the Exchange for Conscious Exchange, which is a community for BIPOC entrepreneurs, service-based entrepreneurs, where they can grow, start, and scale their business. When you think about service-based folks, you think about like the technical skills, you think about like how to be a good coach, how to lead, but no one really teaches you the business aspect on how to actually build a business. So at Conscious Exchange, we help entrepreneurs, BIPOC folks, and BIPOC entrepreneurs who felt like the only to actually start their businesses and live the life of liberation. So freedom, essentially.
I love that. And I mean, to be, fully transparent, even when I was there just early April, I was like, maybe not quite my space, you know what I mean? But as of May 1st, I'm like quite possibly my space eventually, you know? So, like, yeah, it was just May 1st. I ended up leaving my job, and I'm like, you know what? I think I've tried everything. And I say that because, I have a friend back in Phoenix. She looked at my LinkedIn, just, I don't know, she's just scouring the internet, and she's all like, why do you have 52 experiences? I was like, I don't know. Why is that not normal? What's going on? And so I think for me, I'm like, I think I've tasted everything that I've wanted to taste, and I'm like, oh, and I have yet to find what it is I'm looking for or where I can be in my zone of genius. And I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna have to go out on my own, y'all, to some extent, unless there's places like the Conscious Exchange and the Exchange, and what y'all are doing. So it might feel a little bit timely too. So, go ahead.
It's crazy too. Well, one, congratulations on all the work you have done, right? And I think like, while that could sometimes feel like a negative, you have so much experience and more. And the beauty about this, K.Short, you're just starting, and that's the beauty. What we've seen, so for those of you who don't know, I'm a second generation Filipino-American, and what success looked like in my family was climbing the corporate ladder, having the stable job, and feeling that security. And sometimes that looks like just being in a 9 to 5 so we can provide and support, which is great and beautiful and nothing wrong with that. However, that's what my parents defined as success. So I, for a long time, I thought I wanted to live that life, right? The trajectory, the goal, the ladder. And the beauty behind entrepreneurship and what all the 52 things you have done is that you're trying things that you actually want to try and do and say, and you're just not stuck in a mundane role where you're not really growing. When you think about the successful entrepreneurs out there, Gary Vee, Arlen Hamilton, all those folks, they didn't start till they didn't get to where they are in a heartbeat. If anything, it started in their 30s or mid 30s or even later in life. Oh my goodness, who is the director who created? Oh my goodness, there's this one movie where it's Disney and it's she's a Black woman. She has so many Grammys. She works with Oprah. It's like Oprah, Mindy Kaling,
right?
not Issa. Love Issa, obsessed with Issa, but Mindy Kaling, Reese Witherspoon, and Oprah Winfrey. A Wrinkle in Time? No.
I mean, yes.
There's one movie. Anyways, she didn't pick up a camera until 34, and now she has she has all these awards, right? So it's one of those things, because we have media and we have social, like, in access on our phones and free. It's free. It's
right now. It's free.
This is free. This is beautiful, and it's easy to compare our lives on what we want to be, what we should be. So I fear that. And I'm saying this because I need to hear this for myself too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm curious, how do you define entrepreneur? I say that because I think for a long time, I thought my mom was an entrepreneur, is an entrepreneur. Not quite sure, actually. I think I learned new language that she's more self-employed, you know, because and you know, I'm first generation. So so I kind of want to dive into like the experience between first gen and second gen. Curious of the differences and the similarities and how we're navigating that. And so, my mom, she came over and started her own business in adult care. So living in the home with other elderly folks, and, you know, not only did she have to wipe my butt, she had to wipe adults' butts, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just saw that there was not a lot of rest, of course, and even though she was in the home, like, she would burn the midnight oil, she would burn the sticks on both ends. And so I knew that, like, as entrepreneurship, like, super long word, super sexy word, I was just like, I don't know if y'all think it is what we think it is, because I've seen my mom, you know, growing up, and she has still not taken a nap, you know what I mean? So and I think, of course, that just goes with the narrative of the land of opportunity, things of that sort. So I think for me, I've pushed off and said, like, no, I don't want to be an entrepreneur, because I was like, the way I saw it, I was like, I would like to take a nap. Thank you. And I would like to have time for my family and friends. Thank you. And I'd like to eat some food that's actually good for me. Thank you. And so I think that's why I've pushed it off for so long, because I'm like, I've seen what it looks like and what it does for your body. And now she's still in her 70s, still working. I'm like, no, thank you, Mom. I love you, but there has to be another way. So
yes,
what are your thoughts on that?
So one, let's start with the definition. I define entrepreneurship as being multifaceted and finding different paths and things that you love to do and actually doing it. what not defining yourself as one type of title or person, being okay to trying and failing at different things, because there is an entrepreneurship mindset, and I feel like a lot of people don't talk about the entrepreneurship mindset. So let's start with, we both know, right? We're not in corporate America. And again, that's our choice right now. And we choose. If we do go back, that's okay too. That's part of entrepreneurship, because you sometimes have to do what you got to do, right? If that's your journey, that's your journey. So I think my definition is multifaceted of a human being. So I go back, and I actually want to share a story where when I told my mom, so I actually I co-founded Ace Next Gen in Miami, which is an Asian American entrepreneurial group, nationwide and in Miami, which the group that you saw too in California. And when I told my mom that I co-founded in Miami, she says, "Oh yeah, your grandpa was an entrepreneur." And I looked at her, I'm like, "What? Why didn't you tell me this?" She's one of those people who likes to tell things later on in life. But my grandfather was a Spanish professor. I was a teacher for almost 10 years. And then he had his own business. I'm like, "Oh, wait, what?" So if anything, this allowed me to connect my dots of my ancestral roots of like, entrepreneurship is forging your own path, forging the path that you actually want to live and create, and willing to take the steps back and sacrifices for yourself and moving forward, like that big jump when it does happen. There's a quote that I saw one of my friends post. It's, "Just because you plant a seed doesn't mean that you eat the fruit of its labor the next day."
Yeah. And I feel like that's very much like the immigrant story. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to kind of think on a big picture scale. And I don't know about your experience, but I know as second gen, my experience as first gen is because my mom planted such a huge seed, right? Like, I was like, I can't swim. I'm in Arizona. I was like, so the fact that you were on a boat or you swam or whatever the stories, walked to school with no shoes on, which could very much be true because she's in her 70s, and was on the southern part of the islands. But I'm already losing my train of thought in that. But thinking it as first gen, I just put so much pressure on myself. I'm like, my mom made this jump, or swim, and I'm a part of that thread. And then I put all this pressure on myself, like I have to live up to what my mom's done and work until this long. And then I'm, it's barely just now that I'm unraveling and being like, what does it look like to push the needle forward in this generation, and because I'm first gen, I'm like, gosh, I have so much access and opportunity. I'm like, it has to be big, and I don't know, that's something that I've intensified for the past 30 years, being like, oh my gosh, like, it's been asking myself to kind of look at it differently. But I don't know, this sounds like it's a common immigrant story. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so let's start with the mind, right?
Yes, this
beautiful, I think our brains is like what, average 8-7 pounds in our head, right?
Okay.
So all that, right? So when it comes to the immigrant story, and I will never understand what your experiences are coming to a new country, leaving an old life, defining the success for yourself, or defining success for your mother and how she'd had to figure out her life for herself. Access and opportunity was not only not available, but also resources on our mental health was not necessarily available during the immigrants. During that, when was it, the 80s or 70s? When did your mom come?
Yeah.
When did y'all come? Yeah. So if you think about it, we're just having access to a lot of these resources. Yes, education is big, and education will always be important. And it's easier to have access now. And if anything, these days we're actually having these shared experiences, not only in person, but online. So the fact that you're in California and I'm here and we're having this conversation, it's quite remarkable. So going back to, sometimes our parents never process their trauma of what they went through. And sometimes that trauma that wasn't processed came onto us. So for example, our parents sharing that they didn't have chinelas to walk to school because it hurt their feet, but they had to go to school because they knew there was an education. In a way, was them processing, even though they got to go on the other side of it. and while they process, it kind of hurts us too. So in a way, their intention is to say, hey, you live such a beautiful life, but the impact does hurt us because that's the guilt that they may have not realized they put onto us. So it's kind of just a twofold, the intention versus the impact. Intention is to educate. The impact is sometimes harmful. So as first and second gens, like, it's up to us how we take that in. In the end of the day, we can't change our parents. We can never change who they are. And we could also recognize and love them for who they are, but we get to choose what we want in our minds and in our brains, and what we say yes and what we say no to.
Yeah. Tell me more. I know that where you're born and raised, is it Florida?
Oh, I'm in Miami.
Oh, Miami. Okay, yes. That's Florida, right?
That's a whole different story. That's a whole different story.
Like, I went to school in Arizona. We're like number 48. So what's geography? I'm just kidding. But the fact that we're on different coasts, I know that. But yeah, tell me, give us a little bit of background. Like, so you're second gen, and also as you're giving that, tell me, like, again, maybe the differences between and similarities between the experience of a first gen and second gen person.
Yeah. So growing in Miami, Florida, my parents were part of the 1980s immigrant story. So the nursing, I forgot, there was the nursing need, right? So because she immigrated to New York, didn't like the weather, came down to Florida, similar to the Philippines. So she wanted the heat. My parents lived in Miami Beach, and that's where they met because my father actually was a merchant marine. So he sailed the ships for like months at a time, like those big cargo ships, like the big ones. Homeboy used to be the captain. So he would travel all around the world and with those cargo ships while my mom was a nurse in Mount Sinai Hospital. So they lived a beautiful life continue to live a beautiful life in Miami. Being a second gen, I didn't realize that I was actually surrounded by a lot of Filipinos, not just family. In elementary school and high school, we called each other the brown beauties because we were one of the only Pinays. But it was a beautiful experience because we had Haitians, we had Cubans, we had all these diverse folks. And I went to high school in Little Haiti. It was the first Catholic school to integrate in the South. So not only was I not the minority, I was with a whole bunch of different races and ethnicities and differences and beauties behind it. And it wasn't just a white lens school. So that's why I always love talking about Miami, because it's such a diverse city. And the reality of Florida, as you know, Florida is Florida. So they tried to do a lot of different things to keep their political powers and not having minority folks to have access. So while living in our Miami bubble, we got to see this beautiful aspect. The reality that's not always like that in Florida.
So when I grew up in Arizona, where there was no Filipinos, you know what I mean? It was predominantly Mexicans. So I was just like, of course my eyes were just a little bit smaller than everybody else. They're like, yeah, I mean, you look familiar, but like you ain't, that close.
Yeah.
I'm curious of like, what was that like being around other Filipinos? Like, how does that contribute to that identity of yours? And like, is there, and just again, even further curiosity, I say that because my first initial reaction moving to San Diego, I was like, where are the Filipinos at? I was like, oh, they're right next door. Okay, cool. Let me see if I can go find them, And so for me, it's having to navigate, like, what does being Filipino look like? Does Filipino being enoughness of that? But then also, of course, the experience of like, oh, like you were not only growing up with other Filipinos, but also just growing up in a very multi-ethnic community also. And how has that contributed to your upbringing?
Yeah. I also want to recognize, like, while I did mention I grew up with a lot of Filipinos, it wasn't that many compared to California, right? So we had a really close community, and I think I have to remember, like, that's the reality. That was our bubble. We had different communities. But remember the question again? It was like, what was the aspect?
Yeah, just like being around other communities and like how it's navigated through your identity.
I loved being around so many different communities because we got to learn about not only ourselves, but our cultures and finding the similarities of our cultures. And one of my favorite questions is like, what kind of rice do you like to eat? Because rice is such a simple grain, but it can be made in so many different ways, from Haitian black rice and rice and beans to arroz con pollo, which is rice and chicken, or like all these different grains. But it's one little grain can still unite us and still have different multifacets of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I like to connect with folks with different cultures through food, to be honest,
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
food is nourishing, it's loving, it's good for our soul, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how at least I always connected with a lot of folks from different cultures. And two, it was never always like you against me or me against the world. It's more like, hey, let's get to know each other, or hey, I didn't really understand, tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm.
um because we were able to see each other for who we are and not just what our cultures are, if that makes sense. Because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of us were second gens, are second gens. A lot of our parents did immigrate to Miami from Haiti, Cuba, Spain, Brazil, like all these different places. So we had that similarities of, oh, we're from here, but our parents are not from here. So it was
Yeah.
one of those facets as well. And I will
Yeah.
say, code switching is real. So
Mm-hmm.
how you fit yourself into certain groups, whether you want to be like them or talk like them or sound like them, it's real, right? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
similar. It's our
Mm-hmm.
bias. Our brains have different biases.
Yeah. So having all these different communities, tell me more about, and I could talk to you in this in terms of education too. Tell me about like who you were on the playground, like because yeah, were you always
Oh,
yeah yeah just what was that little girl like on the playground?
Jessica on the playground was this little sensitive, chubby kid because she didn't really know how to communicate her feelings. So
Hmm.
I remember always walking around in the recess yard because I didn't know how to really communicate. There wasn't a language barrier. It's just I had a lot of feelings and emotions, and people just wanted to play. And I just felt I was a very insecure kid, to be honest. I was insecure, and I think that the insecurity derived from not only not having a lot of friends, which I did have friends, I wonder because my parents worked a lot. My parents
Hmm.
really, really worked a lot, and it wasn't something that I'm learning now as a life coach is sometimes because our parents worked so hard and they had to provide, they weren't necessarily emotionally available for us. So the
Mm-hmm.
emotional availability on how to hold space, how to ask us about our day, or but not even just ask about our day, but like going in more granular. Like I remember as a kid, when my parents went to like parent teacher night, like I wanted that my teacher to talk about me because that was the first time, and my parents said, "Oh, you're good, everything's fine," and I'm like,
Hmm.
"No, I wanted to learn more. Like what's going on?" Like so it's not necessarily like I wasn't this like energetic human being as a kid. Like as a kid, I was actually really sensitive because I didn't know how to express my feelings and emotions, or even really learn how to play, which is kind of why I
Hmm.
do what I do today.
Hmm. Okay, that's very surprising to me. Okay, so and which is really interesting, and I think this is fun to unravel because it's like I think I was like maybe I okay I wasn't like shy kind of walking around. I was definitely like in these little pockets, but it is I'm sure again when I saw you at Gather and Connect, I was like oh yeah like that we're probably the same person on the playground. Now I'm talking to you, I'm like oh we're not the same person on the playground. If anything, I probably would have came up to you and be like, "Hey Jessica, is everything okay?" And then maybe you didn't share anything. I was like, "Okay, well I'm gonna go play tetherball," you know what I mean, or like whatever
Yeah.
the case. But I love that I want to talk about how you started like unraveling her, and then of course becoming the person that you are today. But I appreciate you saying that like, oh, our parents not being emotionally available. I say that and being like, I'm saying that like, wow, thank you for saying that because I'm like, you're right. That's probably a big reason why I've navigated the world that I have because my mom was always working. And so it's
Yeah.
like weird where it's like we're home. I was in a house, but I wasn't in a home. It's like they were
Mm,
always there. My mom was always there, and then my dad came home at 5:30 and brought me Taco Bell. Thank you, Dad.
yeah.
Or a teriyaki chicken bowl. But like what hurt and pained me, and it still shows up today, is like, gosh, I just want someone to like ask about my day, but actually be genuinely engaged and curious about it. And so for me, I turned to journaling because I was just like, no one's really gonna ask me what's going on. And I think as a young queer person, I was like, and going through that, like. Gratefully, my mom was like, "Oh, that's fine. I used to kiss girls too." Oh, okay, mom, thanks. You know what I mean? But also, like,
Yeah.
I'm 12 and I need help. And I'm losing my friends. And today was poop because, all these things are happening. So, you mentioning that, I'm like, that sounds like could possibly be a common experience for a lot of first and gen folks because we're on new land and charting new territory.
1010%.
So
I had a, actually, so get this, ready? We're going messy here.
let's do
I purposely talk about ending harmful cycles in the coaching work I do, and it's because I do it in my personal life right now. So the other day, my father and I had he said a comment that rubbed me the wrong way, and I got defensive about my mom, and I immediately said, "Why did you say that?" No. And my father is 1 out of 12. So just imagine 1 out of 12 born in the 40s. So,
and where is he in line of the 12?
like towards, I think, number 8.
Number
No,
8,
no,
gotcha.
number 8 or 10. I forgot because there's a lot of them. Either way, as you can tell, there's a lot of children in that family. And I can imagine, and then rest in peace, my Lola and Lola, they weren't necessarily available for them as well. So my father, when he said that comment, I immediately went in like, Dad, why'd you say that? And I was grown up, especially as I was now, as you say, just say it. I was always told not to say a lot of things, like keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, or like what's that phrase in Tagalog? It's like wala nang hiya, but at the same time, like keep your mouth quiet, like don't start drama or don't share your thought opinions.
Yeah.
So every time now as an adult, I would talk to my dad, and I'd have an opinion because I want to share my thoughts. Him growing up it's their way, that's it, no questions asked.
Right.
So you have that mentality, and then you have me, right? Someone who wants to share, someone who is used to this is our way and that's it because I'm older than you mentality. So we got in a heated argument because I wanted to share what I thought. And he said, every time I say something, you always have something back, and I'm always wrong. And then I'm like, no, you're not wrong. I just want to share my thought. So we're just going back and forth, and then it ends up being circles. And I had to realize, I'm like, oh, I just got triggered at that moment. So I had to take a step back. What he said was actually not wrong. It's just an actual comment. But there was a trigger in me, in my 32-year-old self, that brought me back to those stages of like when I couldn't communicate my needs to my dad. So after a lot of intense labor, a lot of like back and forth, I looked at him, I held him, held his hand. I'm like, Dad, I don't want to talk to you like this. I don't want to raise my voice at you. And I'm sorry that I said that. However, this way of communicating needs to stop. Because my family, they're hard-headed, they're back and forth, they're passionate, and at the same time, open communication and emotions are not necessarily invited from their upbringing. So being the person that has to actually stop it and like end those cycles, it takes physical, emotional labor that people don't realize that it's tough, it's scary, it sucks. So the carriers, as one of my colleagues, Shout to Cat says, we carry a lot of ish from generations and generations and generations. However, you can choose whether you want to carry it or you want to let it go.
Or continue it. Some people would just, I meant like continue, like they just won't do this work. They won't ask. They won't do the hard questions, and just have these tools and resources to be like, okay, like I'm feeling triggered right now and I'm able to step back. How many times families just like, let's just keep pushing it forward. We don't even know it, right? Unconsciously. I've been in situations with my mom where I'm like, I can see the little girl in her. You know what I mean? And I'm like, how does my little girl talk to this little girl? And I think that's when I like drop into that. I'm like, okay, like she just doesn't know any better at this point, and I'm just like, how do I non-verbally, I'll get lower than her to let her know, like, we're on the same team. I still have reverence for you and I still honor you as my mom, but like also like we can still try again. And I'm curious of your thoughts on that. And how we're navigating this as a generation. Like, we so happen to be in the generation that, yes, we can talk to people from across, on different coasts, but we're
Mm.
also in the generation where we're having these opportunities to become entrepreneurs and have the tools and resources that might be a little bit easier than what our family had, or grandparents had. But also at the same time saying, like, I'm going to also carry and also practice doing this work with our families. I think a lot of times it can be really easy to be like, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever the case may be. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And just like what it means to be human nowadays, and the vessels that we get to be in while navigating these
Oof.
different kinds of opportunities and challenges.
Oh, what a beautiful loaded question now. So I'm gonna be very transparent. I just started this a year and a half ago when I moved back home. For
Mm-hmm.
most of my career, I was in New York City, checking off the boxes, living the
Well,
independent life, being purposely away from my family because I wanted
mm,
to do that. So because I came back home, subconsciously and consciously, I didn't choose to be the carrier. It just
mm,
happened. Because if
mm,
I'm going to be in the same city as my parents, I want to actually have a beautiful, loving adult relationship with them while honoring our Filipino roots, while honoring me as an American, and while continuing the path that they started.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I'm just sitting
It's
on that real quick. Go ahead.
it's real. It's so real. And I think no one teaches, let's go back. I don't want to generalize. This is the hard conversations that we're having, right? Because they say it's like, just keep it in the home, just keep it there.
Mm,
But no, how do we actually end certain cycles? How do we end certain harmful thought processes and mindsets that only limit us and not actually let us achieve?
hmm. I think one of those for you is the people pleasing. Tell us more about the people pleasing. I also, if you can somehow twirl in there when you started kind of unraveling yourself, you're not, I mean, maybe you still are the shy little girl on the playground, but yeah, when did she start coming out and sharing her feelings with the world and asking for what she
Oh,
wants and needed? Um,
oof.
yeah,
That,
tell us
so
about this
that,
people pleasing path.
the people pleasing path. Let's start with being the minority in a majority world. So I went to school in upstate Westchester County in New York, and I was one out of three Asians in my graduating college class.
Oh.
So yeah. So imagine my background of being in a very diverse city, having my
Hmm.
people, just being in like communities of Black, Brown, Asian, going to a very white school.
Yep.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, like when
I'm
people go to
brown.
college, I'm
Yeah.
I'm brown. Like I like do you know what a tabo is? Like
Yeah, yes, yes. Is
it's
it
like the
the
thing that they help like that you use to wash yourself, like a wash bucket,
like
right?
yes,
So
yes.
there is a moment where my parents are like, "Then make sure you have a tabo," and we look at each other and we all laughing. But then my roommate's like, "What is that?" So
Mm,
code there was a lot of code switching and during college, and as much as I love my college experience, I didn't really embrace who I was as a Filipino American. I was just
mm,
like I was pretending I liked country. I was combining in my Irish friends because I went to an Irish Catholic school in Miami. So it was all this like trying to fit in a space that I wasn't necessarily fitting into. And that
mm,
wasn't until where I went to uh I taught at I taught as a teacher how to advocate for my students, but teaching them how to advocate for themselves.
hmm,
I believe that
hmm,
I became a teacher not only logistically, I thought it was just to pay off my student loans, but internally and deeply, it was actually because I needed to relearn how to advocate for myself, to share my feelings, to communicate my needs, to learn how to read and comprehend again because I wasn't a big reader as a kid, and do all the things that I didn't get as a kid.
hmm, hmm. All right, bring it back real quick. So when did little Jess start unraveling herself? Was it like middle school, high school? Like who was that little girl and young teen girl? And like when did this version of yourself start blossoming? Because even when I'm hearing you in school, you were still kind of, code switching and things of that sort. So, yeah, tell us more about her.
Let's talk about high
Because
school
we're
too.
talking about like the people, yeah, high school and the people pleasing. Are you an only child? Do you have a couple siblings? Like, where does people pleasing come from? Because I think I have some aspect of that, but I very much was not either. I still don't really care. So yeah.
Yeah, it's I think being in a city where being so not being city, I remember watching my mom code switch from her Tagalog accent to her English accent. So
Mm,
making others feel comfortable before I could feel comfortable myself. And I think
mm,
that's sometimes embedded within hospitality, right? Like
mm,
hospitality, there's a mixture of like hospitality and people pleasing, where it's
mm,
like, am I catering to others so they can feel great? Sure, nothing wrong with that. But am I overextending myself so I can have these relationships? That's where the people pleasing came in because I wanted to ensure that they felt comfortable with me, or cared so much if people didn't like me or didn't like what I said, and I would overthink and analyze. And I think the people pleasing came to a point where it's like me just wanting to be accepted. If anything, the deep cause is acceptance and wanting to feel acceptance, whether it was from my parents, from my brother, my siblings, my extended family, just the acceptance. That's something maybe I didn't have. So in high school, I was that. So yes, while Jessica was really shy in elementary and wanted like would walk around the playground, it wasn't until high school and middle school and high school where I actually bloomed into the leader that I am. I took on a lot of different student council roles. I was that president of the student council. I was that person.
I was
But
historian. It's fine. It's
that's a
fine.
story. It's another
Yeah.
story. And the reason why, though, because I remember what it's like not to feel included. And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ensure that the people that were there were included.
Mm,
So it wasn't necessary. So, backstory, people pleasing came in later, but it was more of inclusion at a young age. Being a leader, making sure that people are being heard, felt, and seen.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think I we have a very similar story in that sense. Again, do you have any siblings?
I have an older brother and I have two half siblings.
Yeah. And so not knowing that I was different, feeling like I wasn't included. Now I can see how in our adult work, it's similarities of like, I want to be inclusive. I know what it's like to feel excluded. So I want to
Yes,
always include others.
exactly.
Out of curiosity, do you feel like that there's any moments where that can kind of hold a certain tension, especially with the organization that you're a part of, with focusing on BIPOC folks and things of that sort? How do you hold that tension?
I think to be completely transparent, I think the tension is within myself.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Just either whether it's a limiting belief, whether it's there's always, let's be honest, the world is never going to be perfect. There's always
Right.
going to be something happening. And sometimes it's whether my choice, whether I want to feel what's going on or if I want to stay focused. And because I know what it's like to be excluded, always wanted to include people with what I'm building.
Mm-hmm.
However, something that I'm learning, you can't always bring people on when you're building something.
Hmm.
Not
What do you
everyone is worthy of what you're creating for your life.
mm.
That if
Mm.
anything, sometimes people will set you back in life because they're
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable of the growth that you're evolving into.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to clarify on my question in
Okay,
terms
go
of
ahead.
inclusion, right?
Ah,
We're currently in a culture where yeah, we're just we are wanting to be inclusive, wanting to elevate underrepresented voices, because being a part of these communities, that's a part of it. But also, I'm just gonna get straight to it. When we're working in these, we're saying we want to work with BIPOC folks, for me, cutie BIPOC folks, and I know there's moments for me where when white folks come around, like
mhm.
where's the tension of inclusion, but also being like we're serving these people. Like how do you navigate that? Um, yeah, how do you navigate that? Because it's like for me, it's like gosh, yes, there's in the conversations that we're having and capitalism and colonialism and all these things, but also I'm like. I've learned that for me, what hurts my heart is when I'm on the playground and I feel like we're at a point where it's like I can't even invite certain folks to the table because we're still building our own table. Just all of this. I'm just curious for someone who's in the similar boats of inclusion, but also wanting to work with specific communities. How do you toggle between that tension?
Oh,
I
yeah,
know. I know.
yeah. I toggle between that tension because And the end of the day, you know what you need and you know what you want to learn from. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the person you may learn from is a person who may have very different ideas and values from you.
Mm-hmm.
Someone could be completely opposite of you. Yet, I the way that I toggle between the tension is I respect what I don't agree with, and what can I learn and connect with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of actually, so for example, I during my women's leadership cohort, we had a man in the
Mm-hmm.
cohort because it's also important to educate folks and men and women's leadership. And Coach Pete, white man from California, recognized his privileges and he knew all of that. However, when he coached me on something that I was blocking myself on, he allowed me to see objectively. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute, why is this white man telling me this? But at the same time, he's not wrong at all. He's actually teaching me
Yeah.
something here. So
Yeah.
it's up to us whether we want to accept the tension or put away what's not serving us and accept what is serving us and connecting with us at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, that's at least someone who also can do similar work. I'm just like, gosh, but we learn so much more also when everyone's in the room too, and
Hmm.
I'm only saying this because I struggle with that tension where I'm just like, yes, like how do we support folks who've been underrepresented and been marginalized? But at the same time, I was like, like as much as straight white men can be annoying, there's this nonchalantness or like they're just gonna do it. And I was like, and sometimes when I'm around folks from similar backgrounds, I see us having to fall into the people pleasing and having to like watch our step and having and all these things. But sometimes when I'm with them, I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's just do it. And I'm like, yeah. So it's like, I'm just
Because
trying to
society,
navigate that.
because society taught us not to. Literally,
Right.
if you think about the rules and like who had access to what, they taught us not to.
Yeah.
Systems are built so who can have power, right? But
Yeah.
now we're recognizing we can break those systems. They're invisible systems, but we could break them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
always like to think like if RBG was besties with Scalia, then why can't we find
Whoa.
commonality?
Wait, say that again.
If Ruth
Throwing
Bader
all these
Ginsburg,
letters. Thank you.
yes, sorry, I apologize. If Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
Mm-hmm.
who gave women credit cards, women's rights, was best friends with Scalia, a very right conservative, why can't we find commonality within humans as well?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to just, for me, in my perspective, it's just like, that's where I'm at. You know what I mean? I was like, I
Yeah.
can't, for me, it's so exhausting having to like fight each other on whatever the
It's
case
so
may be.
exhausting. It's so exhausting. Why add more exhaustion? I don't
Exactly.
want to suffer anymore.
Yeah.
Honestly. I don't want to suffer anymore. We're not here to suffer. We're here to be
Exactly.
liberated, to have
E-
fun and play.
Exactly. And I still just want to play with everyone on the playground, dang it. So I know for me, I've struggled just being like, I'm going to hang out with all of y'all. I would really love for all of us to hang out because I think we all have something to learn. But it's like, I say
Yeah.
this as teachers, you can't tell that kid to not come into the classroom. You know what I mean? Like, and I think, when we look at the educational system, like, there's a lot of flaws in it, but also like, hey, everyone has that access to learn and or at least a lot of people have that access to learn. And like as an educator, you're not gonna be like, sorry, I'm not gonna teach you because of X, Y, and Z. So
Exactly.
yeah, I don't
Exactly.
know. I know for me, like wanting to go back to the playground is a big part of is a big part of wanting to do the work too. So
Yeah.
speaking of you gone through high school, you go to college and you learn that you're brown. I say that because I learned that I was brown in college too. I was like, oh, I'm brown, y'all. I just want to let you
I'm
know
brilliant.
that. So how did you navigate through that? But also like coming out of it, did you find yourself having to like settle back into your brownness, or did you find that in school and then moving forward out of that as an educator and also finding Just Say It, life leadership and coaching?
Oof. Okay. Where do you want me to start with that question?
Let's start
There's
with
so many.
Yeah, let's start with being in school. You said that there was a lot of code switching, a lot of code switching.
Mhm.
Was it during that time that you started owning your brownness and these particular identities, or was it having to be out of school and seeing like, oh, like I still bring a lot to the table?
It was out of school, to be completely honest. It was during my early teaching days. Like I remember having a conversation with some of my girlfriends, me being the only brown one in the room, and one of them's like, who I love dearly. She's like, I don't realize that you're brown, and I'm like,
Mm.
oh,
Mm.
okay. And
Mm.
that's nothing against her. Love her to this day. But again, that's something that she never had to navigate. Then being brown, we've always had to navigate that because we
Mhm.
saw things, the survival mindsets, or the things that we would think about what we couldn't have access to. Or even just share. Like I remember in college, the one other Asian girl, we would go to Chinatown and because we loved seeing parts of our culture in a store.
Mhm.
So if anything, I hid it for a long time. I
Mm.
hid my peniness for a while, and even my body's tensing at me saying that, because I thought I had to just do what I had to do, the American dream, right?
Mhm.
Pay off those student loans, have a good stable job, that 9 to 5, live in New York City independently, have my chosen family, which I still love to this day. And it wasn't until my entrepreneurship, when I started my entrepreneurship journey, where I started to truly embrace my peniness again.
Mm.
So that
Mm.
was actually recent, really
Yeah.
embracing that,
Yeah.
who my ancestors are, is who I am, my core, and also to how can I integrate both my Pinay and my Americans together.
Yeah. Tell us more about that with Jess Say It. You said it was just a year ago, and then you founded this group. Like, yeah, tell me how. I don't know. Again, for me, I was like, ugh, I don't know. That just seems really scary. Or was it like this makes sense once you found out that your Lolo was like yeah, I'm gonna do it. It's gonna be easy.
Okay, so let's start with the finally saying yes to myself moment. Okay, you
Okay.
ready?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was 2001, going into 2002. I was right during the pandemic. I was one of the first teachers in New York City to teach in person. And I had an opportunity to continue teaching in a classroom, but there was a calling in me realizing like it's time to move on. I was teaching a lot of adults through diversity, equity, inclusion work, and I knew I wanted to do DEI, and this was during the height of George Floyd. So a lot of companies were like, let's do DEI work, let's do DEI work. And I was called to actually do it and to learn from it and wanting to be in that space. So one day I went to the principal's office and I gave my resignation letter 2 weeks in advance, right? But an hour later, they called me in the office and told me that my last day would be today. Because at the same time, 5 minutes after I had that conversation, another teacher quit as well. So it would have been two teachers quitting at the exact same day. So to
Wow.
cover it up, they just said that this will be your last day. And I
Mm.
remember feeling liberated, but when I left that school, but then the next day feeling heartbroken because for the longest time I defined success based on my identity of being a teacher. I was
Mm.
proud to be a teacher. I still am. But I was really like, oh my God, my identity's gone. Who am I? Like, what am I gonna do? Uh, so it wasn't just figuring that out, right? I'm like, I had no plan, by the way. I had no plan the day after I quit. Just I didn't go to another job. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta search. I gotta figure this out.
Wait, you
So it
put in your
wasn't
2 weeks. You put in your 2 weeks not having a plan.
correct.
Okay, you were like, I'm gonna figure it in 2 weeks, but oh no, it's actually happening today.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
In New York City, by the way, in New York City.
Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, it's not a cheap city. It's a very expensive. It's like living on your own too.
Is it all that it's cracked up to be? Just out of curiosity.
I do love it though. It did it made New York City made me the woman I am today. It really
Mm.
has. It's the grit. It's tenacity. It's the keep going and we choose what we want in our lives, right? So I
Mm.
it'll always New York will always have a special place in my heart because it made me who I am today.
Mm.
So going back, not real having a job, not knowing what to do. I one thing I did know is I wouldn't grow in my apartment if I just stayed in and applied. If I just stayed in the house and applied. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I followed this woman. Her name is Betty, and she was part of this woman and male allies and folks inclusive co-working space called Luminaries in New York City. So I go in and I see this beautiful building. There's these folks just learning, like working together, they're collaborating, they're on their computers, they're talking. And I'm like, what do they do for a living? Why are they not in their desk and their jobs? And why are they not like, what? How, Sway? Like, what's going on here? So I find out that all these folks either have their own businesses, they're entrepreneurs, or they're working from home, and this is their community. It's a space.
Mm.
So I'm like, oh, I can grow here. I can learn here. I can be uncomfortable here, but I could also, this can be a home for me because this is where Jess needs to evolve and become and be. So within 6 months of co-working and networking and connecting with the right people, I finally landed into diversity, equity, inclusion work as a facilitator. So that was beautiful because I got the job the day after my birthday. So that was God right there. Just like, hey, we're here.
Yeah.
Opportunity came and we realized, my partner and I realized maybe it might be time to go home to Miami. He had an opportunity to start his business down here. I was working online. New York City is not cheap. And we both knew that in order to live create the life we wanted, we needed to take a big step back. And that hurt my ego. So I worked so damn hard to be in New York City, to live this be this financially independent life. And now I'm leaving it. What? Why would I do that to myself? Yet there was always a thing like, it's going to be worth it. It'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. So packed up, took the train from Washington to Orlando and moved back with my in-laws. And that year was a tough year because little did I know what I was grieving, but I was also in a high functioning depression, to be honest, because it was this life that I once had. I left it and in a space that necessarily didn't see me as me. So that was pretty messy, just navigating high functioning depression, navigating weekly panic attacks, navigating uncertainties, as you know, and navigating a space where that's not my space anymore, because I used to have my own space for years. So it wasn't until, what was it? Not only women's leadership coaching, but the uncertainty of the tech recession, right, last year, where a lot of tech roles were being laid off, and I was one of them. Just again, I worked this so hard just to go into DEI work, and now it's all gone. So I'm like, all right, what do we do? What do we do? And it wasn't until me learning about women's leadership, and then I got that certification, and I get roles here and there. And I remember seeing Conscious Exchange's email marketing, like, do you want to create a business? Do you want to live a life of liberation? And I'm like, yes. Oh my God, what am I doing? And I'll be honest, I started Just Say It out of survival mode. I thought that I was going to open a business and it was going to make all this money and I'm going to be fine. It's going to be great. Wrong. Wrong. If anything, starting a business is the most inner work journey you can ever create for yourself, because the values and the mission, the thoughts, those are, and companies, it's already done for you. But when you're doing that work for yourself, that just opens up and unlocks a whole nother level of what you actually want to do and what you want to create in your life. So as I was navigating that, I'm like, oh, I need a lot of help. Like, I need a lot of mental help again. Like, I want to go back to therapy. Like, I've been going to therapy for years, but I wanted to go back and I wanted to unpack this because I'm just like, why am I still feeling this way? And it wasn't until therapy where we learned what survival mode is. And that was my big aha moment. Like, I've been living in survival mode my whole life. I thought that things were going to be taken away from me. I thought that I had to do this. I thought that I had to support or people please for others, or it was just all these things. And it was so subconscious. It's still subconscious to this day. But now I recognize, I'm like, oh, it's not healthy for me anymore. So it was kind of this like healing moment where it's like, I've been quiet because I was taught not to say what I wanted to say. I've been quiet because I was living a life that I thought was success for me, because what was supposed to be. So Just Say It came about where I wanted to come up with when I learned about coaching, I'm like, oh, coaching is a form of mental health. It's a way to unlock your present so you can move forward with your life. What? That's a career? People do this for a life?
Mhm.
I've been doing this for years, unconsciously, for many people. And the beauty, though, of coaching is I don't tell people what to do. I actually am the third party perspective, and I connect the dots for them so they can actually have a plan on what they want to do and say.
I love that. I love that. And so I know that you target a specific group. Why that group specifically?
Yeah, so Jess Say It specifically helps first and second generations because, as you know, we were subconsciously taught to live in survival mode. And the things that we talk about within our sessions are the things that we couldn't talk about with our parents or things with our titas or aunts and uncles because they are still in survival mode sometimes. Let's be honest. There's subconscious fears. There a lot of it's subconscious. And with Just Say It, we're able to unpack certain parts of our lives that I hold space for because, again, that's what I do best. I hold space for people individually. And I could also be a third party perspective of seeing things objectively and not always emotionally. Being very emotional, I could also be the objectable person as well.
Yeah. Tell me more about what these experiences, it even sounds like you're like, I'm tired of continuously not getting let go, but like I can only imagine maybe that's a part of entrepreneurship. Where like I keep putting my eggs in all these baskets, and it's like obviously just the turn of this this decade, and it's always a lot of uncertainty. Do you think that that was a part of you deciding to go into entrepreneurship also?
Deciding to go into entrepreneurship wasn't just like oh, I'm gonna do it. Here we are. It was actually like, you've been doing this, Jess. This is entrepreneurship. You've been in this journey for a long time, actually. It was started after you quit your teaching role, and that was over 2 years ago now. And it wasn't like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. No, it's more like, I've done all these roles because I've been trying. I was, during the transition, I was a child wrangler, which is someone who goes onto sets and helps children look a certain way on camera. I was a teacher on set because by New York City law, you have to have a teacher on set to advocate for the kids. I nannied for years. I did so many different things, and sometimes people we don't give ourselves that credit. Like, we've been doing this for years. Yes, maybe it was survival mode, but it's also us exploring and discovering and actually seeing what we actually want to do. However, every time I get off a client call, I always feel really grateful and satisfied because something that I do love is human development and human growth. And that's not me teaching them, it's them doing the work. I'm just the boat. I'm here to support and hold you, cheer you on, but it's you are rowing. You are finding your path. You are unlocking what needs to be happened.
Yeah. If you could go back a year ago, 2 years ago, what do you wish you would have known before embarking on this journey? And like, how could you have done something to better be prepared? You talking to me now, talking to yourself 2 years ago.
Something that I wish to be better prepared for is to, one, remember the uncomfortable. The uncomfortable is okay because being uncomfortable allows you to grow. That's what I believe, at least. To better prepare. Honestly, I wish I knew more about financial literacy. I have knowledge, but I wish I knew more. And I wish I knew, I wish that I'm great in Excel. I'm not great in Excel. Or I could calculate my budget, to the penny. That's not me. I know my numbers, but I wish I knew my numbers to the T of an accountant. I'm not saying that I'm telling you to be an accountant. It's more of a know your numbers, and that's okay. And if there's financial therapists out there too, if there's money blockers, that's happening, because that's a real thing too, especially for first and second gens. Sometimes money is a scary issue because that's a lot of what stress is causing us. And when we look at money objectively, it's like, okay, it's just a monetary thing. Yet when we do have money, there's freedom. So how can we actually look at it objectively? Be okay to accept the risks that you're taking and knowing if it'll be worth it in the long run.
Tell us more about your vision for Just Say It. And what do you foresee for the future for you and for the folks you'll be helping?
Yeah, the vision for Just Say It is to allow folks not only to be liberated for their mind, but creating the path that they want to live, living the life they want to live, and also blocking harmful mindsets. Because sometimes the biggest barrier is our mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that, especially with the folks that you're helping. Do you foresee any events, any retreats? Like, yeah, what is it? I'm kind of wanting to go a little bit further. What does 5 years down the line look like for you? 10
Ooh.
years down the line.
That's a really great question, because I'll be honest, for the longest time, I haven't been creating that. And I actually went to a workshop yesterday. A dear friend of mine, Roger, he's a content CEO. He pushed us like, what do you want your life to be in 5, 10 years? And I need to create that. I need to actually sit down. So I don't have an answer for you yet, but I know that it needs to happen. I will follow up. But I do know that the life that I want to create is being able to travel by city, working, but also playing, providing for my parents and family, providing for my parents, because right now they're providing for me, and I'm very thankful. In 5 years, I want to definitely help as many first and second gens limit themselves, break free from limitations, so they can actually feel liberated in their life and through their minds, and to live their life out loud, literally. A lot of us cover ourselves up. I was almost like curious if I wanted to like wear a different outfit because this wasn't professional enough, because we were taught not to, right? So it's truly the unlearning process, which I love and want folks to have.
Yeah.
I didn't go back. Actually, it's a little ironic. I didn't answer my question of 5 years. So again, I'll go back to that.
It's okay. It's okay. I look forward to a follow-up conversation with that. My last question for you, and then also giving you an opportunity to just share any last thoughts, things that you want to even mark in this point in time. I think this is what I love about what it means to be in the world today. We get to document in video form, as opposed to chiseling on the rocks. I don't know what we was doing, our ancestors were doing back then, documenting our stories. But my final question for you is, if you can go back to that little girl in the playground, what would you tell her? I know, she's so cute.
Oh, I'm gonna cry. I would tell her that all the big feelings that you have is okay. It is okay to feel those feelings.
Yeah. I would have hugged you. Oh, I'd be like, just come play with us.
I'll hug you too.
Yeah.
Jess, that's a cool one.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? Anything that you just want to maybe say to that 5-year-old, 5 years from now, 10 years, whatever you want to mark in this moment?
Oh, girl, you're doing it. Yeah. We're here.
Yeah.
It's happened. We're here. And you're going to continue doing it. Oh, I could see her. I see that 5, 10 year Jess. I don't know how I'm going to get there yet. And I know that I need to just pause and actually dream big, because for the longest time, I didn't believe in my dreams. I didn't even have the ability to dream because I was in survival mindset. So this is me, Jessica Velasco, on May 21st, 5:40 Eastern time, allowing myself to dream and to actually think about it, and pausing and writing it down, because I am a manifestor, I am a generator, and the things that I've manifested in my life today does happen. And now it's time to actually think bigger and dream bigger.
I love that. You're a manifesting generator?
I'm a generator, technically. I do manifest things, but I am a generator.
I'm also a generator. Love building things. Awesome.
Well,
you can say, hence what, Jess?
Hence why you were taken back at the event and you didn't know what to do with yourself when I was working the room and you weren't working the room.
It was so hard. I was just like, oh, press this button like crazy because you got nothing else to do. It's fine.
But that's leadership, though. Yeah. It's learning how to take the steps back and learning how to actually put ourselves in the places that we're not used to, because we're always used to working the room. And it's like, sometimes you just got to sit and be like,
It is. It was nice to rest. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
Jess, where can they find you? How can they work with you? How can we get in touch with you and see all the amazing things that you're going to be doing in the future?
Yes. So first and foremost, you could always find me on LinkedIn at Jessica Velasco. I post there quite frequently. I'm relearning my Instagram, I'm not gonna lie. So you could also find me at Instagram at Jack, which is my childhood name, by the way, Velasco. So Jack Velasco on Instagram and Just Say It on Instagram. So right now, Just Say It is working on it's closing its Unpack and Play program. So, Unpack and Play is a space where folks can unpack certain aspects of their lives, whether they want from overachieving children of immigrants to ready to unpack subconscious fears or even the survival mentalities so they can actually live their lives out loud and learn how to play in their day to day lives. So, you can, if you're curious more about learning how to unpack certain aspects, but also living the life that you want to live, find me and we'll chat.
I love that. Jess, thank you so much for being on Connecting the Dots. I really appreciate you for connecting not only your dots from that little girl on the playground to now, and also just in general. Again, I feel like what's coming about with this is just finding what it means to be educating others in this new world that we get to navigate together. And so I'm so excited that we got to connect because I can't wait to be able to be like, hey, y'all want play? Y'all want to unpack some stuff? I was like, I'm going to kick y'all over to Jess. I'm just going to be the vice principal. I was like, go to her classroom because she knows what she's talking about. So thank you again for being on the show. And we will talk
you.
very, very soon.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing us to share the messiness. Because let's be real, people think entrepreneurship is glorified. Nope, period. It's all the messy things that happen. So happy to be that space, and thank you again.
Appreciate
We'll
you.
chat soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
All right, y'all. I hope that y'all really enjoyed that conversation with Jess. And just to be fully transparent with you, it's rare for me to be able to talk to someone who, it's kind of a similar avatar. That's not something, or someone that I meet very often, someone who tries to be inclusive and also really realizing, oh, it's coming from a place because we weren't included when we were younger, or we didn't feel accepted when we were younger. And so I think that's something to think about, y'all. Like when we're finding our way, is like, what are these things that we experience maybe more often that we would like, that we would want to help creatively solve? And so again, like just getting to know Jess and knowing like first off, like I want to acknowledge the growth that we've come so far from as little people on the playground, but also like how do we pay attention to those dots too, of those things that have always lit us up. And so I love that she shared that this wasn't this thing that just like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It's like, no, I've been doing this work. And I think that's something that I've been experiencing while doing this show with y'all. It's like, I was able to start it because I've been doing this for a decade now. I was like, I'm just going to start it again. But now it's going to, every time and every transition comes with more and more intentionality. And so I just appreciate Jess for wanting to serve this population. I think it's such a unique population being a part of it. And also it's a really exciting population because again, we are the ones that are on new land, new territory, and trying to chart some uncharted paths, and so I love that she's providing a place for us to not only unpack these things, because it's a lot to unpack, y'all, and also a place for us to play. I think that that's something that's going to be super transformative, because I think coming from backgrounds where we always have to be like productive, and of course seeing on social media where we're having to always overwork and like hustle and do all those things, like this is going to be the transformative work in our generation of how to balance the two. And so I'm just so excited to know that Jess is fighting her fight, I'm fighting my fight, but we're also fighting this fight for humanity together. And I think that's the best part about connecting the dots, is knowing that one, y'all are not alone, and young people we're fighting for you. We're fighting for ourselves too. But like, I think a lot of times we may think that there's a lot of hopelessness in the world, but I hope that when you come to these interviews that you see that there are people doing such amazing work all across the globe and on different coasts. And so again, I just want to say, Jess, thank you so much for coming onto the show and for sharing the work that you're doing. Again, y'all, if that's something that you want to do with her, go to her pages. I'll put all of those links below. But most importantly, just know that you're not alone in this process and that we're all in this together. So thank you all so much for watching Connecting the Dots. If you all want to subscribe, do the thing. If not, do your thing too. And stay tuned for the next episode, because it's going to be, just another person out in these streets fighting for a better world. All right, y'all. We'll talk to you soon.
Trust
Bye.
that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.